Actually, what happened was you made a long statement and ended with that question. And I said, let me answer that question, but first let me deal with what you said at the beginning of your statement. And then you started interrupting me. So no, it's not that I'm not willing to answer that question. It's that I had to point out, I think, a lot of the errors that you're making.
All right, this is an explosive debate between Vaush and David Smith on the Russia-Ukraine war. Vaush, as usual, is throwing out these long-winded pseudo-intellectual takes that sound smart until you actually think about them. And Dave, let's just say he's bringing the flamethrower to this so-called intellectual argument. So let's check out this clip together. I'll be giving you guys my thoughts as we go through it as well. Let's get into it.
The demand that Ukraine cannot be a part of the American empire's military alliance was a fairly reasonable one, and we could have avoided this whole war by just committing to that.
I have a quick follow-up on that, Dave. So
sure,
all things, we're dealing in the reality that we did push for the NATO expansion in 2014 and all of that considered. Is your position that there should have been basically zero aid, military, whatever else, government aid to Ukraine after the invasion a couple of years back, basically just none?
Absolutely. If there was any role for the Americans to play, it would have been trying to negotiate an end to the war. Unfortunately, if you're putting me in the hypothetical of you can't change anything before this, but you're already here, we had probably blown all of that goodwill, and there were better parties who would have been more suited for that. For example, going back to even the Bucharest summit in 2008 into the beginning of the Maidan Revolution, Germany was much more hesitant to get involved, to go down this path. There were other European countries who were kind of hey, let's not provoke the Russians. It's part of the reason why Ukraine didn't get a full map invitation in 2008 is the objection of the Germans. So probably someone else would have been better at it. Yes, essentially what I'm saying is that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, the most war-hungry country in the world, the United States of America, shouldn't have been the ones at the table at all. And there might have been some goodwill from other parties who had more of an interest to avoid this catastrophe.
Mic drop. Dave just said what we all are thinking. America loves to act like the righteous mediator in global conflicts, but let's be real. Our track record says otherwise. From Iraq to Libya to Afghanistan, when has US intervention ever brought lasting peace? We don't negotiate peace, we export chaos. And Vaush is probably over there clutching his pearls thinking, oh, how dare you criticize America? But the truth hurts, doesn't it? We are like that one guy at the party who starts fights and then acts shocked when someone punches him. Maybe next time let's let someone else take the lead, like Germany, France, literally anyone, and just keep Uncle Sam out of it.
And if I may, I just... There are elements of this that I guess don't make sense to me. First of all, the claim that America's decision-making is based on it trying to expand its own geopolitical power rather than any altruistic interest. That's true, but that's also the case for all countries. That's basic IR theory. So the idea of this neocon theory of America expanding its interest, that's just nation states. Russia's doing that right now. India's doing that. China's doing that. Everyone's doing that. We're better at it because we're a superpower, of course. But that's a fundamental rule of national exchange. I don't think that it's really a moral question. It's a matter of material conditions in a basic Marxist sense. Who's motivated by what and where they are. In the modern world, the imperial sphere of influence extends to the entire planet. American jets can reach any part of the world in 24 hours. Everyone's can if they have jets. There's no we get the nation next to us, which makes me think the idea that Ukraine is more innately in the Russian sphere of influence I think it's a little bit old hat. At the end of the day, the people in Ukraine were interested in closer relations with the EU, and that is ultimately what triggered everything from Euromaidan, Yanukovych fleeing the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbass following the invasion of Ukraine broadly.
All right, sure, Vaush, let me entertain this for a second and pretend this was all grassroots. No Western meddling, no billions of dollars in aid, just the Ukrainian people waking up one day and deciding to overthrow their government. Are we seriously supposed to buy that? The US and EU were practically throwing a regime change party in Ukraine. And you know what? They got what they wanted, a geopolitical powder keg. Vaush wants to act like this is all organic, but anyone paying attention knows better. The West poured gasoline all over this situation, and now they're trying to convince us it's Russia holding the match. I personally don't buy it. You guys can let me know if you do down in the comments.
this is, again, a complicated situation. I don't mean to detract from the influence that Western arrogance had in it. I would never try to do that. But I do think that, like, your roadmap for how things should have progressed from an American perspective following the 2022 invasion is misguided, because I don't think the world would be any farther from annihilation if Russia had simply marched westward, taken Kiev, and we had a bunch of ginned up Russian soldiers right up against the border of Poland, you know, having just successfully annexed former Soviet/Russian imperial territory. You could imagine the propaganda coming out of the Kremlin about how they're reuniting their people. They're sort of like expanding the Russian interest in like a Duginist ethnic sense, you know, reclaiming the empire. I think that like the incentive structure behind that would be really bad. Like that, you're basically you're throwing chum into the water for sharks. You know, Putin is expansionist. He's been sort of like preempting this for a long time with Georgia. You know, with his behavior with the Chechens. I don't think that would bring us any closer to peace. Now, is the current path we're on right now the best possible road? Obviously not. Nothing we ever do is the best possible road, but I think it's closer to threading that line than just letting them march.
Talk about a cop-out. Nothing we ever do is the best possible road, which translates into, we've screwed up, but we're not going to take responsibility for it. This is the kind of excuse making that's driving the West straight into a ditch. Instead of admitting their strategy has been a disaster, he's just trying to shrug it off and hopes we'll accept mediocrity as the standard. No thanks, maybe try doing better instead of hiding behind nobody's perfect.
Westward with Ben. What I'm interested in, I guess, is practical solutions now, outside of just letting Ukraine get annexed, which I really don't think would have been good for world peace in the long run, even if it would have quickly ended the conflict. How do we incentivize Ukraine and Russia to come to the table and bring an end to this war? Can Ukraine regain its lost territory? I think morally it should be able to, because I don't like nations being rewarded for annexing adjacent territory. But logistically, can they? Would it be possible to end things where they are now? Would Russia keep Crimea and that just be seen as a kind of like dull historical injustice to fade away over time? And 100 years from now, people would be like, did you know Crimea used to be Ukraine? I don't know. There's so much dogmatism. And whenever you bring up like modern solutions, people go back to, I don't know, the end of the Cold War. I understand NATO is not exactly a global force for good, but what can we do now? I mean, I so rarely hear answers that are contextualized in the current moment.
Sure. Can I respond to that? Because there's a few that I want to answer your question at the end there, but just like a few things I want to point out. Number one, I think this is almost like bigger than just any political debate. There's it's a broader theme in life in general. I think anybody who's married, who's on the show or listening to the show knows this is true in personal relationships. There's a tendency if you're in an argument with your wife or your husband or something like that, to focus on what they did and what they did that's bothering you. But a much more healthy posture, if you're in a successful relationship, is that you also add in like, okay, well, what am I doing? How am I participating in this? What have I done that's kind of led to this situation? Generally speaking, I think that if you look at the corporate media, you're going to hear all of this talk about what Putin's done. And I think a lot of times in these debates, people can kind of claim to be like, well, I have a more nuanced position. I'm not simplifying things. I think the point of saying that, like, well, all governments are expansionist by nature, so there's no difference between the neoconservatives and, say, other groups of people. I'm not saying they're the same, but like a logical analogy, it's like, oh, well, all governments kill people. So like what Adolf Hitler's doing is just kind of the same as other governments. It's not exactly true. It's kind of different in scale and in kind. To sit here and say, and look, if we have time, we could go through the history of Chechnya and Georgia and all this stuff. But to zoom out a little bit, during the Cold War, we drew the line at the Elbe River, halfway through Germany. On one side was the Soviet Union, and on the other side was NATO. And we're now talking about Ukraine, and you could sit here with a straight face and say, Putin is expansionist. Okay. I mean, if that's how you want to look at it, it's like, let's just look at the actual reality of what's happening here. It's not that Putin has been this expansionist force. Putin has been almost at every turn reacting to the expansion of the American empire.
Exactly. Finally, someone admits it. Putin isn't expanding for the sake of it. He's reacting to a decade of NATO poking and prodding. Now, that doesn't make him a hero, but let's be real. America's actions have been like pouring gasoline on a fire and then blaming the flames for being too hot. This isn't really rocket science, guys. It's basic cause and effect, and we've seen it happen before.
Gotta give them agency, man.
Ukraine, that's not, listen, that's just not true. It's not denying someone agency to say that they're responding to something. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Responding to everything. That's all life.
Sure.
No one just acts without, you didn't fall out of a coconut tree.
That's just a cop-out. That doesn't mean anything.
You're the one providing the cop-out. You're saying that like it's not possible for Putin to have like a distinctly expansionist element to his rule because everyone's just responding to. So do you believe Putin has a distinctly expansionist element to his rule?
Okay, no, that's not a binary. One is it's not possible.
Wait, do you think he does or doesn't?
Hold on. So instead of just interrupting me, let me make the point. You just laid out a binary between is it possible he has expansionist intentions and does he have expansionist intentions? That's not a binary. There are some expansionist desires that he has. No, in fact, if you actually like educate yourself on this topic. It was our CIA director who said in the Niet means Niet memo leaked by Julian Assange that it verbatim, this was a choice that Vladimir Putin did not want to have to make. This was a choice that Russia did not want to get involved in this war.
And yet he made the choice. He made the choice to invade, to bring troops down to the Ukrainian border, to commit to multiple years of, like, come on, you know, this is the thing. I ask you for, like, what can we do now? And immediately it's back to the Iron Curtain.
Well, hold on. Vash, hold on. Here's what happened. I'm sorry,
I just want to know in the modern context.
I get it. Actually, what happened was you made a long statement and ended with that question. And I said, let me answer that question. But first, let me deal with what you said at the beginning of your statement. And then you started interrupting me. So no, it's not that I'm not willing to answer that question. It's that I had to point out, I think, a lot of the errors that you're making. Now, if you want just to say, what could we do right now? Well, look, we're going to have to be realists about this situation and admit that Ukraine is losing this war and that they're not going to drive Russia out of Crimea. That's a joke. They're not going to drive Russia out of many of the territories that they've taken right now. We should be working toward a deal, a peaceful solution, which has been on the table several times throughout this war, and it's been the West who has been trying to squash it.
Well,
that's what we should do.
Not true at all, though.
I think the truth is Western arrogance has fueled this war, and doubling down on bad policies won't fix it. I am someone who's all for peace, less war, no war at all, if any. But I also think that war is not derived from a simple, someone saying, oh, I declare war. It's a cause and effect of many different things, which I think the US is a part of. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below if you agree or disagree or what your overall thoughts are. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.